Ladies and gentlemen, a horror story has emerged out of urban upper middle class Gurgaon. A story that shows us how colonial and frankly cruel we are when it comes to our domestic help. They cook, they clean for us, they look after our children, they look after our parents. Their presence ensures that you can go to work. And yet we have separate cups and plates for them. Yet we don't let them use our bathrooms. Yet they cannot sit in your presence. Simply put, we sometimes forget that our maids, our house helps are humans with families, with friends, with lives of their own. One family in Gurgaon, ladies and gentlemen, didn't just forget that their 13-year-old domestic help is just a child. They treated her like an animal. She was beaten up with iron rods and hammers. She was bitten by a dog. The dog was coaxed to bite her. She was stripped naked by her employer's son, who then videographed her nude and touched her inappropriately. They poured acid on her hands. She was given one meal, just one meal once in 48 hours, which means one meal in 2 days. She was held captive in a room. She wasn't allowed to call her parents. Her mouth was taped so she could not shout. They threatened to kill her if she even mentioned the horrors to anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a 13-year-old we are talking about. A 13-year-old child who was pushed into the workspace because of poverty. The family paid her 9,000 rupees a month and they thought they had bought her, so they could do absolutely anything they wanted to with her. For 5.5 months, this little child went through hell till her mother, with the help of her employer, freed this minor from the clutches of this abusive family. The child is presently admitted in a hospital undergoing treatment. Her employers, a woman and her 2 sons, have been booked under the POCSO and Juvenile Justice Acts for assaulting and torturing her. The young girl's father says he was shocked when he finally saw his daughter emerge from captivity.
कब से काम कर रहे थे आप वहाँ पे?
6 महीने से।
क्या काम करते थे वहाँ पे?
झाड़ू पोछा बर्तन डस्टिंग बिस्तर बाथरूम कुत्ते को खाना खिलाना उनको देखभाल करना और खाना ना बनाना बर्तन धोना किचन की सारी काम करवाना।
तो आप वहीं पे रहते थे घर पे?
वहीं पे रहते थे।
खाना वाना देते थे टाइम से आपको?
टाइम से नहीं देते थे, कभी भी नहीं।
मम्मी से कब से नहीं लिया?
6 महीने से।
पैसे देते थे आपको काम के?
2 ही महीने दिया उसने।
पिटाई कौन करता था आपको?
3 जने मारते थे, एक औरत 2 लड़के।
कौन थे वो 2 लड़के?
2 लड़के उसके बेटे थे। रोड से और हथौड़े से हर चीज से मुझे पीटा था।
मेरे बच्चे काम कर रहा था कोठी में, 4 महीने से बात नहीं करने दिया, मोबाइल से बात कराता था, कुछ नहीं कराता था। बच्चे को डराता था, मारपीट करता था। हमको भी धमकाया, तू आएगा तो तुमको भी मार दूंगा। मैं डर से मारे नहीं आ जाता था। मेरे कोई नहीं था सहारा। अब इनका पास वो भी कितने कहने से नंबर लिए, तब इनसे बात हुआ तो बुलाया।
Now, this is not the first time a house help, that minor, has been subjected to violence from her employers. In February this year, for example, a couple were arrested for torturing their 14-year-old house help. This incident too, just by the way, was from Gurugram. In this case, the poor girl was assaulted with hot tongs and batons. Cuts were made on her body using sharp instruments. Why? Because the couple felt she was not doing her work properly. Then you remember these scenes. There was the incident from Delhi's Dwarka in July, where a pilot wife and her ground staff husband were beaten up by relatives of a 10-year-old house help who was assaulted by the couple. Who's to blame for these horrific crimes? Of course, it is the employers. No one is doubting that. But you and me as well, who just turn away when we see children sweeping and cooking instead of being in school. Now, the labor laws when it comes to children are very, very clear. No child under the age of 14 can be hired for work, and if someone does so, it is a crime that attracts up to 2 years of jail and a fine of up to 50,000 rupees. It isn't just the employer who's committing a mistake by making a child work. Even the family of the minor employed is liable to be penalized. Let me go across to my guests who are joining us this evening. Pradeep Rawat is an ex-RWA President joining us on the broadcast. He's from Gurgaon. Reshmi Ganguly is a member ActionAid joining us on the broadcast as well. Thank you very much. Reshmi, first, can I ask you, as someone who looks at the issues of domestic help, can I ask you what you make of this incident? This is, after all, Gurgaon. This is where urban upper class India lives. Yes. And what has happened has taken us back to the 17th century, where slavery was still legal.
Yes. I think this tragic incident is a reflection of the crisis, and it is the reflection of the societal mindset. The people really think about domestic worker and the helper, and they still think that it's a kind of a slavery and the bondage kind of work. And you can also understand that means from the background that the root cause of this kind of problem, it's not very superficial. It's very, very like deep rooted, and where the societal mindset, the economic problems, and also that the rural urban migration and many kind of like the crises are now being really reflected through this incident. So it's a very tragic, and obviously it's a deep rooted crisis.
Okay, when you say this is a deep-rooted crisis, can you tell us, since I can hear you, Reshmi, I can hear you very well. When you say the crisis is deep-rooted, what do you mean? You are someone who works with domestic help. You are someone who knows their stories well. What is it that completely shocks you? I mean, there are some things we hear. I guess we are so used to it that we don't bat an eyelid. But what are the things that truly shock you when you speak to domestic maids? What is it that they tell you?
I think this is a kind of a reflection of a very, very negative kind of like attitude, and how people really think, and they really think domestic work it is. Means they think it like it's a slavery, and in today's context also, how they really think that the women and the children, they work as a domestic helper, it's so totally devalued. They don't recognize them as a worker, as the domestic workers movement is still continuing, and on the question of recognition as worker. And when in India, where we have introduced labor codes and to safeguard the protection of the worker, means there the domestic work, how these domestic workers are being perceived by the society and perceived by from the policy responses. And when we are saying that it's a 14-year-old girl, means it's totally a criminal. It's a penalized kind of offense. It's an offense. So I don't have much words to really describe it, because it's a very brutal and tortured kind of incidents which came up. And as a child labor, we are also trying to protect and ensure that no child should really enter in this kind of like work, or not in this kind of any form of work as labor.
But we know there are lakhs of children who are employed under the age of 13, who are employed everywhere you look. It's not just in homes. You look at shops, you look at a chai ki dukaan, you look at a kirana shop, and you'll see these 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds working. Pradeep Rawat, the fact is that the law is very clear. The law is very clear that no child under the age of 14 can be seen anywhere near a workplace. Now, if the law is very clear, how is it that in a place like Gurgaon, in societies, in high-rises, you have a 13-year-old child employed in the first place?
Thank you, Shreya, for having me on the show. To tell you the truth, as my previous panelists mentioned, this is a deep-rooted problem. Although we are supposed to be educated, we are supposed to be knowledgeable, we happen to know everything which is happening around the world. And if something happens to a far-off place, we sometimes cry about it also. But the fact remains is this kind of incidents are happening on a very regular basis. And the sad part is we do notice it, we do make a hue and a cry for a few days, and then we move on. Until and unless people start educating their children, especially the school part, this deep-rooted problem will persist, simply because in societies, people have become, kind of so solitary kind of living. They don't bother what is happening into the next door house. So nobody bothers what is happening in the next door. Nobody, in fact, cares about it. And as you rightly said, in societies, this is happening on a regular, simply because people don't care what is happening to the next door. And the fact is, we as humans have stopped believing that the so-called labors, and especially I agree, a labor should not be less than 18 years of age. Secondly, when we hire somebody for household work, we should be able to see our society as such, and even it's the duty of the neighbors also. They should see if help is being treated properly or not. And moreover, if something wrong is happening, there are stringent laws.
No.
And especially in this case, when the girl is just 13, even the POXO is applicable.
But we
the
look
thing is,
away.
we just talk about it.
Point
we
is, we
and
look
then we
away.
move on. Then we move on. Yes,
Mr.
absolutely.
Rawat, we just, yeah, I know what you're saying, because things like this in this year itself have happened in Gurgaon. We've seen that, and we've seen urban upper middle class couples treat their house helps like servants, like slaves, actually, not even servants, like slaves that they have bought and therefore own. But Vikram Singh, monsters will be monsters, and monsters will exist in every society. This woman and her 2 adult sons, who not just tortured this young girl, they stripped her, they videographed her, they poured acid on her hands, they instigated their dog to bite her, pet dog to bite her. They didn't give her more than 1 meal in 2 days. These are monsters. And there is nothing you can do about monsters beyond the fact that when their crime comes to the fore, arrest them. But what about all of us? What about the neighbors? Are we trying, Mr. Rawat here is trying to tell us that solitary living hai, no one knows what is happening next door. That's not really true, is it?
Shreya, good evening. There's so much that we can do. The police, number one, have registered a case, and I would be very satisfied that if depraved monsters are brought to book in the next 48 hours, and the law take its own course in 7 working days, not that it works for 6 months and then relegate it to the background. What the RWA can do, that we live in societies, we should have a law, as we have laws in respect of so many things, loudspeakers, public control systems, that we not employ domestic help below the age of 18, because it is punishable in the Child Labor Act, as also in the labor laws, as also in the POXO and the Juvenile Justice Act. Therefore, if anybody employs that, and it is common knowledge, almost all families do employ domestic help, and if they employ somebody below the age of 18, then the society also has a role. And in our case, these not go by default. There is an ecosystem in every society that such monstrosity cannot go unnoticed.
Okay.
And if there is such a case, then that person should be named, shamed, and ostracized. Now, the police, the RWA, and also members of the RWA have a role to play. And the media also has a way to expose. I would be very happy if the perpetrators, the aggressors, and those, I'm given to understand, I'm forgetting the first, but the Sharmas who are accused of this crime, they need to be named, because they have no alibi and have no, as far as law, their name should not be made public.
Okay.
Now, Shreya, I would suggest the society.
Vikram Singh, your audio is not very clear. Can we just get our producers to fix the audio for Vikram Singh? Pradeep Rawat, that's the exact point I was trying to make, that it is, it's not like we don't know what is happening in our neighbor's house. We know what is happening, we just choose to keep quiet. The problem is that we choose to keep quiet. Are you telling me that no one in the society knew that there was a 13-year-old girl working in the homes of these monsters? I refuse to believe that.
I agree what you're saying and what I'm saying. Both are basically on the same line. What I'm trying to say is we pretend to be not noticing. This is the difference between not actually seeing and pretending to be not seeing. This is the kind of society we have become. If something wrong is happening, nobody wants to intervene. Nobody wants to say that this is wrong being done. They just want to avoid until unless the problem comes to my house. Until unless I see the problem happening to me, we don't intervene. And that is happening in almost all strata of society. This is the reason things like these go unnoticed. People
Okay.
do notice it, but they don't make a complaint. They, in fact, as the POCSO law says, even the neighbor has a duty. Even the person who sees it, he has the duty to inform the police. But we don't, because we don't want to get ourselves entangled into the web of law. That is a problem society has. This mindset has to change, and that's why I keep on insisting, being a founder of the Gurugram parents, that children are the basic integrants. They must be taught at the school level. A wrong is a wrong, and a boy or a girl should not be touched or should not be asked to do something which they don't want to. A no should mean no. That is the simple fact of life.
Okay. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think this incident in Gurgaon is a moment for us to introspect as well about how we treat our domestic help. Again, as I said, these are men and women who come into our house and make our lives easier. They cook for us, they clean for us, they look after our elderly parents, they look after our children. They are the reason we can go out and work. They are humans with a life, they are humans with a family, they are humans with an entire ecosystem. They are humans who have family back in their villages. Please respect them. They are rendering a service to you, but they are not your servants. And if you see something like what has happened in Gurgaon happen in your colony or your society, for heaven's sake, call the police on your neighbors. They are not neighbors, they are monsters. On that note, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. There's much more coming up on the other side. Do stay with us.